The boardroom fell silent. The $50 million UAE deal hung by a thread as the Arabic interpreter collapsed. CEO Sophia Morrison, stunning in burgundy Valentino, diamond earrings gleaming, watched helplessly as partners prepared to leave. Then a clear voice, "Excuse me, I can translate." Everyone turned to 8-year-old Emma Williams, standing beside her father David, the IT technician. Only David showed no surprise. David Williams, 35 years old, had worked as an IT technician at Market Vision Corporation for 3 years. After his wife Sarah passed away from cancer when Emma was 5, he raised his daughter alone in their modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, living paycheck to paycheck, but never letting Emma feel the weight of their financial struggles. His salary covered the basics: rent, groceries, utilities, but there was always enough love to fill the spaces where money fell short. Their small home became a sanctuary of learning and affection, where David encouraged every curiosity and celebrated every achievement, no matter how small. Emma wasn't just intelligent. She possessed an extraordinary passion for languages that mystified everyone who encountered her. While other children her age spent evenings watching cartoons or playing video games, Emma would curl up in the corner of their small living room with Arabic podcasts flowing through her headphones, her fingers tracing Mandarin characters on flashcards, or losing herself completely in French novels that challenged readers twice her age. She approached each new language like a puzzle waiting to be solved, finding joy in the rhythm of unfamiliar words and the satisfaction of understanding different ways people express the same universal emotions. David couldn't explain where this remarkable gift had originated. Neither he nor Sarah had been particularly gifted with languages, though Sarah had always encouraged Emma's curiosity about the world beyond their neighborhood. Perhaps it was genetic, perhaps it was simply Emma's natural empathy expressing itself through communication, but David supported his daughter's passion wholeheartedly. He spent money they couldn't really afford on language learning software, borrowed books from the library in languages he couldn't even identify, and celebrated every small milestone in Emma's linguistic journey as if she had conquered mountains. Their evenings together followed a comfortable routine. David would return from work, tired from troubleshooting computer networks and fixing technical problems that other people created, to find Emma at their small kitchen table, homework spread before her in neat piles. But alongside her regular schoolwork, there would always be additional materials, self-chosen projects in whatever language had captured her interest that week. She might be practicing Portuguese pronunciation by repeating phrases from an online tutorial, or carefully copying German sentences into a notebook with the concentration of a medieval monk transcribing sacred texts. David often wondered if Emma's gift was connected to her mother's memory. Sarah had dreamed of traveling the world, of experiencing different cultures and meeting people from every corner of the globe. Cancer had stolen those dreams before they could be realized, but perhaps Emma's linguistic abilities were a way of honoring her mother's unfulfilled wanderlust, of connecting with the wider world that Sarah had always wanted to explore. The thought brought both comfort and sadness, a bittersweet reminder of love lost and love continuing. Sophia Morrison inhabited an entirely different universe from David and Emma's modest Queens apartment. As the sole heir to billionaire Robert Morrison's empire, she had been raised in a world where luxury wasn't just commonplace but expected, where designer clothes filled walk-in closets larger than most people's bedrooms, where Chanel dresses hung beside Hermès bags like artwork in a museum, where Tiffany jewelry and Rolex watches represented not extravagance but simply the standard accessories of daily life. Her Manhattan penthouse overlooked Central Park from the 68th floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of the city that never failed to remind visitors of the vast distance between her world and theirs. The apartment itself was a testament to wealth beyond imagination, filled with original paintings by artists whose names appeared in art history textbooks, furniture crafted by designers whose waiting lists stretched for years, and rare objects collected from around the globe by previous generations of Morrisons. Every surface spoke of money, taste, and generations of accumulated privilege. Despite possessing the kind of natural beauty that turned heads on the street and drew photographers' attention at charity galas, despite having access to opportunities that most people could only dream of, Sophia carried within her a heart that was tender, sensitive, and deeply wounded by the harsh realities of her privileged existence. She had learned early that her wealth made her a target, that people would befriend her, romance her, and marry her for reasons that had nothing to do with who she was as a person. Trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. Her marriage to businessman Marcus Reed had begun like a fairy tale. He was handsome, successful in his own right, charming in the way that comes naturally to people accustomed to getting what they want. For 2 years, Sophia believed she had found someone who loved her for herself, someone who saw past the Morrison name and fortune to the vulnerable woman beneath. The truth, when it finally emerged through overheard phone conversations and discovered financial documents, shattered something fundamental within her soul. Marcus had pursued her methodically, strategically, viewing their relationship as a business merger rather than a romantic partnership. He had studied her preferences, memorized her favorite flowers and restaurants, learned to mimic the emotional responses she needed to feel loved and valued. Every kiss had been calculated, every gesture of affection performed with the precision of an actor following a script. The realization that even her most intimate moments had been manufactured for profit left Sophia feeling hollow, used, and profoundly alone in ways that money could never heal. From that devastating discovery forward, Sophia constructed invisible but impenetrable walls around her heart, trusting only what could be measured in contracts and quarterly reports, finding safety only in professional relationships where expectations were clearly defined and emotions remained carefully controlled. She learned to navigate the business world with the same precision her father had taught her, but beneath her polished exterior lay a woman who had forgotten how to hope, how to trust, how to believe in the possibility that someone might value her for reasons beyond her bank account. 1 week before the fateful board meeting that would change everything, David received an urgent assignment to repair the network system on the 40th floor, where Market Vision's executive offices hummed with the quiet efficiency that unlimited budgets could purchase. The assignment came during a particularly difficult period for their small family, as Emma was recovering from a persistent cold that had kept her home from school for several days. With no family nearby and no money for a babysitter, David faced the impossible choice between leaving his sick daughter alone or bringing her to work and risking his job. Emma, sensing her father's dilemma, promised to be invisible, to sit quietly with her books and not disturb anyone while he completed the necessary repairs. She packed a small backpack with her current French novel, some language-learning flashcards, and a notebook where she practiced writing in different alphabets. The executive floor represented a world entirely foreign to David's usual workspace in the building's basement technical department. Here, natural light streamed through massive windows, expensive artwork adorned the walls, and the carpeting was thick enough to muffle footsteps completely. The contrast with his cluttered basement office, with its fluorescent lighting and concrete floors, could not have been more stark. Emma settled herself in a corner of the main workspace, cross-legged on the floor with her book open across her lap, completely absorbed in the story unfolding on the pages before her. She had developed the ability to disappear into literature so completely that the world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only the characters and their adventures to occupy her attention. Her lips moved silently as she worked through difficult passages, occasionally consulting a small electronic dictionary to confirm her understanding of unfamiliar vocabulary. David worked methodically to diagnose and repair the network connectivity issues that had been plaguing the executive offices for several days. The problem proved more complex than initially anticipated, requiring him to trace cables through walls and ceiling spaces, test multiple connection points, and gradually isolate the source of the intermittent failures that had been disrupting important video conferences and file transfers. Sophia arrived at the office that morning dressed in a crisp white Dior dress that emphasized her elegant figure, her feet perfectly balanced on Saint Laurent heels that added several inches to her already impressive height. Her pearl earrings, a gift from her grandmother, caught the morning light as she moved through the workspace with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command and unquestioned authority. Her daily routine typically involved reviewing overnight reports from international markets, preparing for meetings with department heads, and managing the countless details that kept Market Vision Corporation operating smoothly across multiple time zones. She prided herself on maintaining complete awareness of everything happening within her domain, which made the sight of an unknown child in her executive workspace both surprising and immediately concerning. The presence of Emma in the corner, quietly reading her book and disturbing no one, triggered an automatic response in Sophia's carefully ordered world. Professional environments had rules, boundaries, protocols that separated business operations from personal circumstances. In her experience, these distinctions were essential for maintaining the kind of efficiency and focus that generated the profits her father expected from his investment in market vision. "This is highly inappropriate," Sophia said, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone unaccustomed to having her judgment questioned. "Bringing children to the workplace demonstrates a fundamental lack of professionalism and understanding of proper business boundaries." David looked up from the cable junction he had been testing, his face immediately flushing with embarrassment and anxiety. He had hoped to complete the repair work quickly and quietly, without drawing attention to his daughter's presence or creating any complications that might jeopardize his employment. The disapproval in Sophia's voice confirmed his worst fears about the risks he had taken by bringing Emma to the office. "I'm incredibly sorry, Miss Morrison," David replied, his voice tight with stress and genuine remorse. "My daughter has been sick for several days, and I didn't have anyone who could watch her today. This situation won't happen again, I promise you that." Sophia's initial response was to maintain her position firmly, to insist on the enforcement of rules that governed her perfectly controlled professional environment. She had learned through painful experience that making exceptions, showing flexibility, or allowing personal circumstances to override business protocols inevitably led to complications and compromised standards that could spiral beyond control. But then Emma's phone rang with a soft, musical tone, and the little girl answered in rapid, completely fluent Spanish, her voice warm and animated as she chatted comfortably with what sounded like an elderly neighbor seeking help with some important information. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with genuine warmth and patient concern, as Emma apparently helped the caller understand the details of an upcoming medical appointment, carefully repeating important information and confirming that everything was clearly understood. For just a moment, something fundamental shifted inside Sophia's perfectly controlled world. The child spoke Spanish with the confidence and sophistication of a native speaker, displaying a linguistic ability that seemed impossible for someone her age. But beneath the surface of professional surprise, Sophia's sensitive heart registered something even more significant. The natural kindness in Emma's voice, the patience with which she helped someone who needed assistance, the spontaneous generosity that seemed to flow from her without any calculation or expectation of reward. David noticed the flicker of surprise that passed across Sophia's blue eyes, the slight softening of her rigid posture, but he didn't dare hope that this moment of wonder might translate into understanding or forgiveness. The collision between their two vastly different worlds had created an initial barrier of misunderstanding and social awkwardness, but it had also planted an unexpected seed of curiosity that neither of them fully comprehended. As Sophia walked away from the encounter, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble flooring, she found herself thinking about the little girl with the remarkable linguistic gift and wondering what other surprises might be hidden in the lives of people she had never bothered to truly see or understand. The brief glimpse of Emma's natural compassion had touched something in Sophia's carefully guarded heart, creating a small crack in the emotional walls she had spent years constructing around herself. Returning to the moment of crisis in the boardroom, Emma stepped forward from her position beside her father with a composure and confidence that seemed impossible for someone her age. The massive conference table, surrounded by leather chairs worth more than most people's cars, had become the center of a tense standoff between Market Vision Corporation and their UAE business partners, with $50 million hanging in the balance and reputations at stake on both sides. Emma addressed the Arab businessmen in flawless, formal Arabic, her pronunciation crisp and her grammar impeccable as she introduced herself with the proper cultural formalities and respectfully requested permission to assist with the translation services that had become so urgently necessary. Her understanding of protocol impressed the UAE delegation immediately, as she demonstrated not just linguistic ability but genuine respect for their cultural traditions and business customs. The Arab businessmen exchanged surprised glances among themselves, clearly amazed by this unexpected development. They had traveled thousands of miles for this crucial negotiation, bringing with them the authority to commit substantial resources to a partnership with Market Vision, but the sudden collapse of their interpreter had threatened to derail months of careful preparation and relationship building. Emma's intervention offered them a lifeline, but more importantly, it demonstrated the kind of cultural sensitivity and respect that form the foundation of successful international business relationships. She didn't simply translate words mechanically from one language to another. She understood the subtle nuances, cultural contexts, and delicate implications that could make the difference between success and failure in cross-cultural negotiations. When a particularly complex contract clause threatened to create misunderstanding and potentially derail the entire agreement, Emma explained to both parties that certain phrases carried different connotations and emotional weight in Arabic culture compared to their English equivalents. She helped them find alternative language that preserved the essential business terms while respecting the cultural sensitivities that were crucial to maintaining the dignity and comfort of all participants. Sophia stood motionless in her burgundy Valentino dress, her diamond Harry Winston earrings, reflecting the conference room's sophisticated lighting as she watched this extraordinary scene unfold before her eyes. Her heart raced with a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't immediately identify or process. Amazement at Emma's remarkable capabilities, profound relief that the crucial business deal might be saved from disaster, and something deeper, more personal, that touched the vulnerable places in her heart she had tried so hard to protect. The little girl navigated the treacherous waters of international business negotiations with a wisdom and diplomatic skill that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond her chronological age. She balanced the competing interests and cultural expectations with the grace of a seasoned diplomat, finding solutions that satisfied both parties while maintaining the respect and dignity that were essential to successful cross-cultural partnerships. As the final contract details were resolved and the ceremonial signatures were exchanged with appropriate formality, Sophia found herself studying Emma's face intently, searching for any signs of calculation, ambition, or awareness of the enormous power she had just wielded in saving this crucial business relationship. Instead, she saw only genuine pleasure in helping others communicate effectively, a pure and uncomplicated joy in using her remarkable gifts to solve problems and bring people together across cultural and linguistic divides. The $50 million deal was secured, ensuring Market Vision's expansion into Middle Eastern markets and protecting hundreds of jobs that depended on the company's continued growth and success. But Sophia realized that something far more valuable had been revealed in this conference room, a glimpse of innocence, goodness, and authentic generosity that she had almost forgotten could exist in a world that had taught her to expect deception and self-interest from everyone around her. The successful conclusion of the emergency meeting left the Market Vision boardroom buzzing with animated conversation and nervous energy, but the reactions among the executive team were far from uniformly positive or supportive. While some board members praised Emma's remarkable intervention and expressed genuine admiration for her linguistic abilities, others whispered suspicions and doubts that cast shadows over what should have been a moment of celebration and relief. How could an 8-year-old girl possibly understand the intricate terminology of international business contracts, the legal implications of specific clauses, or the cultural nuances that could make or break relationships with foreign partners? Was this some kind of elaborate setup, carefully orchestrated by her father, to gain favor with the company's leadership and advance his own career prospects within the organization? The questions multiplied in hushed conversations throughout the executive floors, as colleagues who had never paid attention to David Williams suddenly began speculating about his motivations, his background, and his relationship with his remarkably gifted daughter. Some suggested that the entire situation was too convenient, too perfectly timed to be anything other than a calculated move designed to manipulate the company's leadership into viewing him more favorably. Sophia retreated to her corner office sanctuary, with its breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park and its carefully curated collection of expensive art pieces that represented both her refined taste and her substantial wealth. She placed her Hermes Birkin bag beside her antique mahogany desk, a piece that had belonged to her great-grandmother and carried with it the weight of family history and tradition. Unconsciously, she touched her Cartier bracelet, a nervous habit she had developed during periods of uncertainty and emotional turmoil, as if the familiar weight of the precious metal could somehow anchor her to reality when her feelings threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. The bracelet had been a gift from her father on her 21st birthday, a symbol of her entry into adult responsibilities and the beginning of her formal involvement in the family business empire. Her sensitive heart wanted desperately to believe in the authenticity of what she had witnessed in the conference room, to accept Emma's intervention as a pure expression of goodness and generosity in a world that had taught her to expect ulterior motives from everyone who entered her life. But her rational mind, scarred by years of betrayal and manipulation, raised warning flags about the possibility of deception and calculation beneath the surface of apparent innocence. The internal conflict between hope and suspicion created a cognitive dissonance that left her feeling emotionally exhausted and deeply unsettled. She thought about her penthouse apartment, filled with designer clothes worth more than most people's annual salaries and precious objects that represented security and status, and wondered when material possessions had become her primary source of comfort and confidence. Meanwhile, David worked at his basement desk, acutely aware of the undercurrent of skepticism and speculation rippling through the company's social networks. He noticed the suspicious glances from colleagues who had previously treated him as invisible, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered a room, and the subtle but unmistakable shift in how people around him behaved in his presence. His protective paternal instincts kicked into high gear immediately. He had spent years carefully shielding Emma from a world that might not understand or appreciate her unique gifts, creating a safe environment where she could explore her passion for languages without feeling like a curiosity or an oddity. The idea that corporate politics might transform his beloved daughter into a tool for advancement or a subject of gossip filled him with a fierce determination to protect her innocence at any cost. Emma, with the intuitive sensitivity that often accompanies exceptional intelligence and emotional maturity, felt the change in atmosphere around her like a shift in barometric pressure before a storm. She began to question whether her spontaneous desire to help in the conference room had somehow caused problems for her father, whether her intervention had been appropriate or welcome, and whether she should have remained silent instead of offering her assistance. A few days later, a short video clip capturing Emma's impromptu translation session began circulating online after a curious marketing employee, excited by what she had witnessed, recorded and shared it with a caption describing the 8-year-old genius who saved $1 million deal. The video spread rapidly across professional networks, accumulating millions of views and thousands of shares within the first 24 hours of its release. The viral nature of the content attracted attention from news outlets across the country, with reporters calling Market Vision's public relations department to request interviews and background information about the remarkable child who had captured the internet's imagination. Talk show producers expressed interest in booking Emma as a guest, offering substantial appearance fees and promising national exposure that could launch her into celebrity status virtually overnight. Comments ranged from genuine admiration for Emma's abilities to skeptical speculation about the authenticity of the situation, with some users questioning whether the entire scenario had been staged for publicity purposes. Others made inappropriate observations about Emma's personal life, her family's economic circumstances, and her father's motivations for allowing her to participate in such a high-stakes business environment. David discovered the video late one evening while checking his personal email, and his reaction was immediate, visceral, and overwhelmingly protective. He felt a surge of anger, unlike anything he had experienced since the dark days following his wife's death, when he had struggled to understand why someone so good and kind had been taken from them while others who seemed less deserving continued to thrive. His daughter's privacy had been violated without permission or consideration, her innocence exploited for entertainment and public consumption, and their quiet family life suddenly thrust into an unwanted spotlight that threatened to destroy the careful balance he had worked so hard to maintain. The comments, many of which speculated inappropriately about Emma's abilities and their family's personal circumstances, made him feel sick with rage and protective fury. Early the next morning, David requested an emergency meeting with Sophia in her executive office, a space he had never entered before and had never expected to see. The opulent environment overwhelmed his senses, surrounded as he was by original paintings worth more than his annual salary, antique furniture that belonged in museums, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city that reminded him powerfully of the vast distance between their social positions. But his focus remained entirely and intensely on protecting his daughter from further exploitation and preventing any additional damage to their family's privacy and security. He had spent the sleepless night planning what he would say, how he would make Sophia understand the seriousness of the situation and the urgent need for immediate action to protect Emma from continued exposure. "This has to stop immediately," David said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion and parental desperation. "My daughter is not a circus act or a marketing tool for your company's benefit. She's a little girl who tried to help people communicate, and now she's being treated like some kind of freak show attraction or internet sensation." "Sophia," dressed in an elegant Chanel blazer that emphasized her sophisticated style and wearing her grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom that connected her to generations of Morrison women, felt her heart constrict painfully as she recognized the genuine anguish and protective love in David's voice and facial expression. She understood immediately and completely that she bore significant responsibility for what had happened to Emma and their family. As the CEO of Market Vision Corporation, she should have anticipated this possibility and established clear, enforceable guidelines about privacy, confidentiality, and the protection of individuals who became involved in company business through unusual circumstances. Her failure to protect Emma from exploitation felt like a profound betrayal of the trust that had been placed in her, however unintentionally, when the little girl had stepped forward to help solve their crisis. The weight of her negligence and lack of foresight pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden that threatened to crush her spirit completely. "I take full and complete responsibility for this situation," Sophia replied, her voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion and genuine remorse. "I should have protected her immediately, should have seen this possibility coming and taken steps to prevent it from happening." David's anger was entirely justified and completely understandable, but it cut deeply into Sophia's already wounded heart, reminding her of every previous time she had been disappointed by people who claimed to care about her welfare and happiness. The conversation ended with David's firm insistence that his daughter be left alone completely, that no further attempts be made to involve her in company activities, publicity opportunities, or any other situations that might expose her to additional scrutiny or exploitation. As he left her office, closing the door behind him with barely controlled fury, Sophia was left alone with the crushing weight of her failure and the painful recognition that she had damaged something precious and irreplaceable through her negligence and lack of protective instinct. The silence in her office felt oppressive, filled with regret and missed opportunities for connection and understanding. 3 days after their confrontational meeting, Sophia was returning from an important business lunch at an exclusive Michelin-starred restaurant, where she had been dressed elegantly in her Prada midi dress and carrying a Bottega Veneta clutch that cost more than many people's monthly salaries. The lunch had been successful from a business perspective, securing another lucrative partnership that would add millions to Market Vision's annual revenue, but she felt emotionally hollow despite her professional accomplishments. As she entered the building's marble lobby, preparing to return to her office and the endless stream of meetings and decisions that filled her days, she encountered an unexpected scene that stopped her in her tracks and changed her perspective completely. Emma sat cross-legged on the polished marble floor beside an elderly Mexican man, patiently helping him complete a job application in Spanish with the kind of careful attention and genuine concern that was becoming increasingly rare in their fast-paced world. The little girl explained each section of the complex form slowly and clearly, ensuring that the gentleman understood every question before helping him formulate appropriate responses that would present his qualifications and experience in the most favorable light possible. Her voice carried none of the impatience or condescension that adults often displayed when helping people who struggled with language barriers or bureaucratic paperwork. Sophia paused behind a marble column, watching this interaction with growing amazement and something approaching awe. Emma wasn't performing for an audience or seeking recognition for her helpfulness. She was simply being genuinely kind to someone who needed assistance, investing her time and energy in helping a stranger navigate a system that must have seemed impossibly complex and intimidating. There was no camera recording her compassionate actions, no adult standing nearby to praise her efforts or reward her generosity, no external motivation or benefit waiting at the end of her assistance. This was pure compassion in action, the kind of selfless generosity that Sophia had almost forgotten existed in a world that had taught her to expect ulterior motives and calculated kindness from everyone around her. Standing there in her expensive designer dress, surrounded by the marble and gold fixtures that represented wealth and privilege, Sophia felt a profound emptiness wash over her like a cold wave. She realized with startling clarity that Emma's remarkable linguistic gifts weren't the result of ambition, calculation, or any desire for personal advancement. They grew naturally from a genuine desire to connect with and help other people who were struggling to communicate or understand their circumstances. Tears began to flow down Sophia's carefully applied makeup as she understood how completely and fundamentally she had misjudged the situation, the family, and the motivations behind Emma's intervention in the boardroom crisis. She had been looking at Emma through the distorted lens of corporate strategy and personal advancement, projecting her own experiences of betrayal and manipulation onto a family that operated from entirely different values and principles. For the first time in years, Sophia felt the carefully constructed walls around her heart beginning to crack and crumble, allowing her to remember what it felt like to be moved by simple human goodness, to witness acts of kindness that asked for nothing in return, to believe that people could care about each other without expecting compensation or recognition for their compassion. The following day, Sophia made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her, including herself. Instead of handling the situation through formal corporate channels, sending carefully worded emails, or calling official meetings with predetermined agendas, she chose to approach David and Emma in the most humble and personal way possible. She went to her walk-in closet, past racks of designer dresses and shelves of expensive accessories, and selected the simplest clothes she owned, a plain white cotton shirt and a pair of basic blue jeans that she had purchased years earlier but rarely worn. For the first time in her adult life, she deliberately left all her jewelry at home, removing her rings, bracelets, and earrings, keeping only her father's Patek Philippe watch as the sole reminder of her privileged background. The transformation felt both liberating and terrifying. Without her usual armor of expensive clothes and precious accessories, she felt vulnerable and exposed, but also more authentic than she had been in years. She made her way down to the basement technical department, a part of the building she had never visited before, carrying with her 2 simple sandwiches from a nearby delicatessen and a bottle of fresh fruit juice for Emma. The basement workspace was a stark contrast to her executive suite, with its fluorescent lighting, concrete floors, and utilitarian furniture that prioritized function over aesthetics. The environment was clean and well organized, but it clearly existed in a different economic universe from the luxurious offices on the upper floors where she spent her working days. She found David during his lunch break, sitting alone in the small employee break room with its vending machines, microwave oven, and collection of mismatched chairs that had been discarded from various office renovations over the years. The contrast with the executive dining room where she usually took her meals, with its crystal chandeliers and catered cuisine, could not have been more pronounced. "I think we need to talk," Sophia said simply, settling herself across from David on one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs without any attempt to maintain her usual air of executive authority or social superiority. Her entire appearance had transformed completely. Gone was the intimidating CEO in designer clothing, replaced by a woman who looked vulnerable, genuine, and surprisingly approachable. David was stunned by this unexpected development. He had expected corporate damage control, perhaps a legal discussion about non-disclosure agreements and privacy policies, or possibly even termination for his role in the viral video incident. But he certainly hadn't anticipated this humble, personal gesture from someone who inhabited such a different social stratum from his own working-class existence. Sophia explained that she had already taken decisive steps to have the video removed from all platforms where it had appeared, working with the company's legal team and public relations specialists to minimize further distribution and protect Emma's privacy. She had also implemented strict new policies about employee confidentiality and the protection of individuals who became involved in company business through unusual circumstances. But more importantly, she wanted to make amends in a meaningful way that honored Emma's compassionate nature while providing her with a safe, appropriate outlet for her remarkable linguistic abilities and her obvious desire to help people who were struggling with communication barriers. "I'd like to invite Emma to participate in a volunteer program we're starting," Sophia continued, her voice carrying none of its usual corporate authority and instead trembling slightly with nervous sincerity. "Teaching English to immigrant families who are trying to build new lives here, helping them navigate the challenges of adapting to a different culture and language system. Not as a company representative or a publicity opportunity, but as someone who genuinely wants to use her gifts to help others succeed." The proposal was carefully crafted to respect Emma's age and David's parental concerns, while creating an environment where her abilities could flourish without exploitation or inappropriate exposure. The volunteer program would be small, private, and focused entirely on service rather than recognition or advancement. The sincerity in Sophia's trembling voice, the humility in her posture as she sat uncomfortably on the cheap plastic chair in the stark basement room, and the obvious effort she had made to approach them as equals rather than subordinates, began to soften David's protective anger and defensive suspicion. He could see that this wasn't a calculated business move or an attempt to manipulate the situation for corporate benefit, but a genuine effort to honor his daughter's compassionate spirit while making amends for previous mistakes. Emma, who had been listening quietly from her corner where she sat with her latest language learning materials, looked up from her books with bright, interested eyes that sparkled with enthusiasm and hope. "I would really like to teach people," she said softly, and in those simple words, David heard the unmistakable echo of his late wife's generous spirit and her belief in the importance of helping others whenever possible. The volunteer program began quietly and gradually, with Emma serving as a young assistant teacher in English classes designed specifically for immigrant families who were struggling to adapt to their new lives in America. Rather than positioning herself as the CEO overseeing a corporate initiative or charity project, Sophia participated as a genuine volunteer, trading her expensive business attire for comfortable casual clothes and keeping only her father's watch as a subtle reminder of her background and family history. Emma approached each teaching session as an adventure, finding creative ways to make language learning enjoyable and accessible for students of all ages. Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding both David and Sophia of the simple pleasure that came from using their abilities to help others, of the satisfaction that grew from building genuine connections across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Other employees began joining the program voluntarily, creating a growing community of people who wanted to contribute something meaningful beyond their regular job responsibilities. 6 months later, on a peaceful Sunday evening in early spring, Sophia found herself being welcomed into David and Emma's small Queens apartment for dinner, an invitation that represented a milestone neither of them had explicitly acknowledged but both deeply understood. She arrived wearing a simple cotton dress, carrying only a modest bottle of wine and a box of French pastries for Emma, having deliberately left behind all the designer accessories that had once defined her public image. The apartment radiated warmth and authenticity that no amount of money could purchase. Emma's language books filled makeshift bookshelves, her artwork decorated the refrigerator, and family photographs showed the history of love and loss that had shaped their journey. The three of them sat around the small kitchen table, Emma working on her Spanish vocabulary between her father and Sophia, occasionally asking both adults for their opinions on pronunciation or cultural context. They laughed together as Emma attempted to teach Sophia a few words of Arabic, patiently correcting her pronunciation and celebrating her progress with enthusiasm. They discussed their dreams and fears with openness that Sophia had forgotten was possible, sharing stories from their past and hopes for their future without fear of judgment or betrayal. Sophia realized she had finally found what she had been searching for without knowing it. Not professional success or social recognition, but the simple joy of belonging to a family that valued love over luxury, authenticity over appearance, and genuine connection over material achievement. David felt his heart opening in ways he hadn't experienced since his wife's death, not because of loneliness, but because of genuine affection and the recognition that he had found someone who could love both him and Emma without reservation. Emma, with the intuitive understanding that children often possess, recognized that she had gained a maternal figure who would love and support her unconditionally. As candlelight flickered across their faces and comfortable conversation continued around the modest dinner table, the story found its quiet conclusion. Three people who had been incomplete in different ways had somehow found their way to wholeness together, creating a family built on authentic love, mutual respect, and shared commitment to caring for each other through whatever challenges and joys the future might bring.